Hello, class. Today we are going to talk about one element of fiction that is greatly important, and that is the character. We're going to look at different types of characters and explore why an author might choose to use one over the other. Let's begin. We have already seen a number of characters within the stories that we've read. We saw a few characters in Hills Like White Elephants, and then quite a few more in the lesson. So we're going to look at what makes up these different types of characters and use these characters as examples as we go along. So one of the things that I would ask before getting into characters is uh, do we have a universal human element, or is there something that all humans can connect with or all humans experience? We see a variety of motivations, a variety of attitudes, of ways of dealing with trauma, ways of dealing with self-esteem. Is there something that unites us all? If we can determine aspects that all humans share, that will help us in understanding characters as we encounter them, or lessons that I've learned throughout my own life. We can also learn through these characters. Even though we haven't experienced what they're experiencing, we can put ourselves in their shoes and determine, would I act the same way? Would I make the same choices? And this is where we get to that universal human element. It really boils down to choices. Is there a common ethos that we are all born with that maybe tells us what is good from bad, or determines how we react to certain choices and situations where we are involved? So one thing that we need to discuss is the difference between dynamic and static characters. Dynamic characters often go through some sort of change or learn some lesson throughout the story. We can think of Jig in Hills Like White Elephants. She seems to go through a change from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, especially in her attitude or the decision that she's about to make. We also see the dynamic change in Sylvia. Sylvia begins feeling confident and sure of herself. Later on in the story, we see that she now feels shame or feels that life hasn't been fair and that she needs to compensate for that. Meanwhile, we also have static characters. So static characters don't go through a change. They're consistent throughout the story. We look at somebody like Miss Moore in the lesson. Miss Moore is a college educated woman. She is trying to educate these children, and she pretty much stays the same throughout. She doesn't gain any kind of lesson, or she doesn't make a change in her personality or attitude anywhere throughout the story. We see the same thing in The American. In Hills Like White Elephants, the American is always himself. He never grows. He is always this kind of passive aggressive person, this self-centered person that we see run throughout the story. So he never changes. He never learns anything. Where we get into some gray area, we can look at somebody like Sugar in the lesson. Sugar is the first student to really state the lesson that Miss Moore is trying to give, that the world isn't fair, that some people spend so much on frivolous things while others are just trying to buy the bare necessities. However, at the end of the story, Sugar doesn't seem to grasp the lesson or doesn't seem to allow the lesson to change her. And therefore, we could argue that she is maybe in between this static and dynamic relationship. Now, often confused with static and dynamic are flat and round characters. Flat characters are two-dimensional. They serve as an archetype or a typical example. We could think of characters that represent maybe a mailman or a teenage girl or a child opening a present. They are these typical characters. Flat characters are sometimes labeled as static characters because often they don't go through some type of change, but not all static characters are flat characters. I wouldn't say that Miss Moore is a flat character. She is a more round character because she has a personality. She has this uniqueness about her. We can identify with her and what she's trying to do within the story. So, round characters are ones that have their unique personality. A flat character might be a teacher on the first day of school. A round character is going to be a teacher on the first day of school who is trying to be friends with the students or who is unsure of herself and is always second guessing herself. So we see more of that personality and more identification with these round characters. An example of a flat character would be the woman serving drinks at the train station in Hills Like White Elephants. She is more of an archetype. We don't know about her personality. We don't really get invested in this character. Whereas round characters would be more like Jig, Sylvia, and Miss Moore. We understand them and we can maybe put ourselves in their shoes more easily than the flat characters. And we want to put ourselves in their shoes. We want to feel what they're feeling and experience what they're experiencing. I would doubt that many identified with the woman serving drinks and was concerned about what is her role in this story. And identifying with characters is what leads us to motivation. So if we can understand a character's motivation, it helps us to better understand the message of the story. As we look at the motivation of characters, we would either root for or against them. For instance, we might root for Jig in Hills Like White Elephants and root against the American because we understand what his motivation is, his self-centeredness. Whereas Jig, we're rooting for some type of change or for her to stand up for herself. Understanding that motivation is going to help us to recognize the message or the theme that we're seeing throughout the story. As we move through further stories, pay attention to the characters. Try to identify if they are meant to be a flat or round character, a static or dynamic characters. All of these different characters are useful in moving forward the plot or creating a comparison between two characters, one that changes, one that doesn't. And finally, determine how these characters shape that message of the story.